I thought it was just another repair job, until she looked at me, the kind of look that makes time stop. She was older, confident, the kind of woman who's seen life and stopped chasing fairy tales. But when she whispered, "Don't stop," something in me did. I wasn't supposed to feel it, that pull, that silence between us, but that moment changed everything. This isn't a story about lust. It's about two people who found something real, in all the wrong places. I wasn't supposed to notice her that way. She was just another client, someone who'd brought in her silver sedan because it made a strange sound when turning left. But the moment she stepped out of the car, something shifted in the air. The sound of the shop, metal clanks, compressors, faint music, seemed to fade into the background. She wore a beige coat, slightly oversized, her hair pulled back like she'd done it in the car mirror. Not perfectly, but real. And when she looked at me, just for a second, it felt like she saw something she hadn't expected. "Can you take a look? It's been making that sound for a week," she said. Her voice was low, careful, like she'd learned not to take up too much space. "Sure," I replied, wiping my hands on the rag hanging from my belt. "You can wait inside if you want. Might take a bit." She smiled faintly. "I'll stay here. I like the smell of oil and metal. Reminds me of old places." That was the first thing that surprised me about her. Most people wrinkle their nose, but she didn't. She leaned against the wall, crossed her arms, and watched as I crouched by the front wheel. There was something about being watched by her that made everything feel slower. Every bolt, every motion, too deliberate, too aware. When I stood to explain what I found, a loose joint, nothing major, she stepped closer, just enough that I could smell faint perfume under the scent of rain. "You're good at this," she said, eyes following my hands. "Been doing it since high school," I said. She nodded. "You remind me of someone I used to know." Silence lingered, the kind that's too fragile to break. I wanted to ask who, but something in her face told me not to. Instead, I bent back down to finish tightening the bolts. She moved beside me, careful not to get in the way, but close enough that her coat brushed my shoulder. That tiny contact shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. When I finally finished, I turned to tell her she was all set. That's when it happened. The hood was still open, engine ticking softly. She leaned in, looking at the belts, and said quietly, almost like a whisper meant for someone else, "Don't stop." It wasn't seductive. It wasn't even intentional, I think. But it hit me in the chest. Maybe she was talking about fixing the car. Maybe she wasn't. Her voice carried something heavier, something that didn't belong in a simple repair shop. I froze, wrench still in my hand. She realized what she'd said and laughed it off. Too quickly. "I meant you're thorough. Most people rush." I nodded, pretending to buy it, though we both knew what lingered in the space between. When she drove away a few minutes later, the shop felt too quiet. The smell of her perfume still hung in the air, mixed with the metallic scent of oil. I should have gone back to work. There were other cars waiting, but my hands wouldn't move. I just kept staring at the empty spot where her car had been, trying to shake off the way her voice had settled in my head. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the same words over and over. "Don't stop." Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was reading into it. But the way she said it, soft, tired, almost pleading, made it hard to believe it was nothing at all. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. She came back 3 days later. I heard her voice before I saw her, soft, half apologetic, speaking to the receptionist about a small noise that still hadn't gone away. When I walked out of the workshop, she was standing by the counter, holding her car keys like she wasn't sure whether to stay or leave. "I think it's still making that sound," she said, looking at me this time. I knew the car was fine, but I didn't say that. "Let's check again," I offered. Maybe I missed something. Outside, it was late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything look nostalgic. She stood by the car while I opened the hood, watching quietly, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. "You always look so focused," she said after a while. "It's calming somehow." I smiled without looking up. Guess that's the goal. Must be nice, she murmured. To have something that keeps you steady. I wanted to ask what didn't keep her steady, but I didn't. Instead, I just nodded, pretending I didn't hear the exhaustion under her words. When I finally turned to her, I noticed how tired her eyes looked. Not from lack of sleep, but from something heavier, the kind of tired that comes from pretending you're fine for too long. She caught me looking, and a faint, self-conscious smile appeared. Sorry, I didn't mean to dump my mood on you. Long week. It's fine, I said. You don't have to smile if you don't want to. She blinked, surprised, like no one had ever said that to her before. Then she looked away, exhaling through her nose. You're too young to talk like that. Maybe, I said, but I know what tired looks like. For a moment, neither of us moved. The engine clicked softly as it cooled, and the smell of oil and rain filled the air again. Then she reached out, almost without thinking, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Her fingers trembled slightly. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, but I couldn't stop watching the way her hand lingered midair before she pulled it back. Everything seems fine, I said finally, closing the hood. But if it keeps making noise, I'll take a deeper look. She nodded but didn't leave. Instead, she leaned against the car, looking at the empty road ahead. Do you ever feel like you're just waiting for something, but you don't even know what? The question hit harder than I expected. Yeah, I said quietly, more than I want to admit. She looked at me then, really looked, the kind of look that strips away pretense. Her eyes softened, just slightly, before she looked down. I should go, she said, but she didn't move right away. And for that small, stretched moment, with the sound of the wind brushing through the trees and the faint hum of the cooling engine, I thought maybe she wanted to say something else. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. It started raining that night. The kind of slow, steady rain that makes the whole town sound quieter than usual. I'd just finished closing the shop when I saw her car headlights through the mist. She stepped out holding an umbrella, hair slightly damp, eyes searching for something, or maybe someone. Sorry for dropping by this late, she said. The car. It's making that sound again. She didn't look at me when she said it. I knew she didn't come here for the car, and yet I didn't ask why. I just unlocked the gate and let her drive in. Inside, the lights hummed above us, casting long shadows across the wet floor. Her coat was soaked near the shoulders, and without thinking, I offered a towel from my workbench. Thanks, she murmured, taking it carefully. Her hands brushed mine. Barely, but it was enough to freeze both of us in place for half a second. She began drying her hair, laughing softly. You must think I'm crazy. Who shows up at a mechanic's at night for a noise no one else hears? I don't think you're crazy, I said. I think you just don't like quiet. That made her stop. She looked at me, eyes unreadable, and then she smiled, sad, almost defeated. You notice too much. The rain outside grew heavier, blurring the sound of the world beyond the shop. She stood beside me, close enough that I could see the raindrops clinging to her lashes. Want some coffee? I asked. She nodded. I poured 2 paper cups from the small machine in the corner. The bitter smell filled the air between us. We stood side by side, sipping quietly, like 2 people pretending to have nothing to say. Then her phone buzzed. She froze before answering, glanced at the screen, and pressed decline. Someone important? I asked gently. No, she said. Not anymore. Her voice cracked a little at the end. And before I could think, I reached out. Instinct, not intention, and touched her wrist. Just lightly. She didn't pull away. For a moment, she let my hand stay there. The sound of rain, the hum of the lights, her shallow breathing, everything slowed. I could have said something. I could have stepped closer. But before I could speak, she looked down at where my fingers touched her skin and whispered, You should go now. Took me a second to realize what she meant. I nodded, stepping back, my hand falling to my side. When she turned away, I caught my reflection in the window, her silhouette beside me, blurred by rain. I walked to the door, my chest tight, my pulse uneven. Outside, the rain was colder than I remembered. I stood there for a long time, staring back through the glass, watching her pick up her phone again, this time answering it. I didn't hear her words. I didn't need to. My hand was halfway to hers when she said, "You should go now." And I did. But only my body left that room. I didn't see her for almost a week after that night. But she never really left. Her voice, that unfinished look in her eyes, it lingered. Every time I heard rain against the roof of the shop, I caught myself glancing at the gate, half expecting to see her headlights again. She came back on a Thursday. Not for the car this time, she admitted that right away. "I was nearby," she said, setting down a small bag. "Thought I'd bring you something. Coffee." Her voice was calm, practiced, but her hands trembled just enough to give her away. "Thanks," I said quietly, taking the cup. "You didn't have to." "I know." She smiled without warmth. "I just wanted to." The shop was quieter than usual. Even the machines seemed to sense the weight in the air. She walked slowly, looking at the walls, the scattered tools, anything but me. "I shouldn't have come that night," she said finally. "I don't know what I was thinking." "You were just tired," I said. "Everyone needs a place to breathe." She turned toward me then, her eyes sharp but soft. "And you think that place was you?" The question hit harder than I expected. "I don't know," I admitted. "But you looked like you needed someone to see you." Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. Instead, she stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel the warmth from her coat. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered. "Coming here, pretending it's about the car, pretending we don't—" She stopped herself, biting down on the words. I wanted to tell her I understood, that I hadn't stopped thinking about her either, that I'd replayed every look, every silence, every moment that almost became something else. But the words caught in my throat. She took a deep breath and looked around again, her gaze landing on the same spot where we'd stood that night in the rain. "It's wrong," she said. "Whatever this is, it's not supposed to happen." I nodded. "Then why are you here?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Not angry, not awkward, just honest, like both of us had finally run out of lies to hide behind. She met my eyes, steady, unguarded, almost tender, and for a moment, everything that had been held back between us existed in that look. Every word unsaid, every touch avoided, every reason ignored. Then, finally, I whispered, "What are we doing?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me, eyes wet, jaw trembling, like she was already mourning something we never even had. And somehow, that silence said more than any confession ever could. The next time I saw her, she wasn't herself. She walked into the shop slowly, her shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of something invisible. No coat this time, just a simple sweater, damp from the drizzle outside. She didn't speak right away. She just stood there, looking at the floor, her hands clasped together. "Rough day?" I asked softly. She gave a short laugh, the kind that comes out when you're trying not to cry. "You could say that." I waited, leaning against the counter. I'd learned that if I stayed quiet long enough, she'd eventually talk. And she did. "My ex-husband called today," she said. "He wanted to meet. He's getting remarried." Her voice didn't crack, but her hands did. She pressed her palms together, fingers trembling slightly. "I thought I was past it," she went on. "It's been years." But hearing his voice, it's strange. You think you've healed, and then suddenly you realize there's still something left. Something you never dealt with. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just stepped closer, quietly, until I was near enough for her to feel my presence but not my touch. She looked up at me then, eyes glistening under the dim light. "You remind me of him," she said. "Not in the way you look. It's the way you listen. He used to once." That caught me off guard. I didn't want to be compared to the man who broke her, but something in her tone told me it wasn't about that. "Do you still love him?" I asked. She shook her head. "No." But I think I still love who I was when he loved me. Silence again. Only the faint tick of the clock and the sound of rain sliding down the window. She took a slow breath, her chest rising and falling, as if something inside her was finally unclenching. For a long time, I felt invisible, she said, like I was still living in someone else's memory. But when you look at me, she stopped herself, searching for words that didn't sound too heavy. When you look at me, I feel real again. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. You are real. She smiled faintly, her eyes softening. The kind of smile that carries both gratitude and fear. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached for my hand. Just for a second. Just enough. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. I thought, watching her. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. And in that small, quiet moment, something between us changed. Not with words, not with promises, but with understanding. She let go first. But I knew nothing would ever feel the same again. It happened on a Sunday evening. The sky was half gold, half gray, like it couldn't decide whether to stay or leave. She came by again without a reason. No car trouble, no excuse, just her. I was walking, she said softly, standing by the door, and somehow my feet brought me here. I nodded. I didn't ask why. I just motioned for her to come in. The shop was quiet, the smell of oil faint now that the day was done. She moved slowly, her eyes wandering across the tools, the old radio, the small coffee machine, things she'd seen a dozen times, but tonight she looked at them like they meant something. I used to think I was good at being alone, she said. But lately, silence doesn't feel peaceful anymore. I leaned against the workbench, hands tucked in my pockets. Maybe it's not silence, I said. Maybe it's just loneliness wearing a quieter face. She gave a small laugh, tired, but real. You talk like someone twice your age. I feel like it when you're around, I said, half smiling. She didn't reply. Instead, she walked closer until she was right in front of me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the pull. Do you ever wonder, she said, voice barely above a whisper, how something that shouldn't happen somehow feels like it already has? Her words hung there, fragile, electric. I didn't trust myself to answer. I could only look at her, at the small lines around her eyes, the quiet tremble in her lips, the way she kept her chin slightly lifted, like someone trying not to fall apart. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched my sleeve. Just that. A simple, trembling touch that carried more meaning than anything we could have said. You shouldn't be here with me, she murmured. Then why do you keep coming back? I asked. She met my eyes, no hesitation, no excuses this time. Because you make it easy to forget I'm supposed to be strong. And with that, the air between us broke. She stepped closer, until the distance disappeared. Her hand slid from my sleeve to my wrist, her thumb tracing the edge of my skin. Gentle, uncertain, but deliberate. We didn't kiss. We didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. For the first time, I felt her guard drop. Not completely, just enough for me to see the woman behind all the restraint. The woman who had been pretending to be fine for too long. We stood there for what felt like hours. No words, just shared breath and unspoken understanding. When she finally stepped back, she looked lighter, softer, real. She didn't say she loved me, I thought, but she let her guard down. And that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. It's been months since that night in the shop. The rain still comes and goes. The days still start the same: coffee, oil, engines, silence. But something inside me doesn't feel the same anymore. She doesn't come by as often now. Maybe that's how it should be. Maybe what we shared wasn't meant to last, only to remind us both that we were still capable of feeling something real. Sometimes, I still see her car around town. She waves from the driver's seat, the kind of polite wave people use when they're pretending not to remember too much. And yet, every time, my chest tightens. Not with regret, not even longing, just a strange, quiet warmth. I think about that night often. The way she stood in front of me, trembling but brave. The way neither of us said the words we both understood. And how that silence, heavy, full, alive, somehow meant everything. I used to think love had to be loud, that it needed words, certainty, or promises. But she taught me that sometimes love hides in restraint, in the choice not to cross the line, in the moment you hold your breath instead of reaching out. She once said she felt invisible, and maybe that's what drew me to her. The way she carried loneliness like it was part of her skin. I didn't want to fix her. I just wanted her to know that someone saw her, really saw her, and didn't look away. And maybe that's all love is, in the end, seeing someone clearly and letting them see you back, even for a moment. I don't know where she is right now. Maybe she's with someone new. Maybe she's alone again. But I know she laughs more easily now. The last time I saw her, she was smiling at something on her phone. A real smile, the kind that doesn't hide behind politeness. And that was enough, because what we had wasn't about possession or permanence. It was about reminding each other what it felt like to be alive, to be seen, to be wanted, to be vulnerable again. When I think of her now, I don't replay the what-ifs anymore. Just small moments. Her voice saying, "Don't stop." The sound of rain against the windows. The way her hand lingered on my sleeve. Little pieces of something unfinished, but beautiful anyway. I didn't just fall for an older woman. I fell into something rare, something true. And I hope, if you're listening, you find something like that too. Sparkles, if the story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?